messages of unity, struggle, and spiritual awakening. His music transcended borders, his legacy immortal. But behind the public figure was a man battling an unrelenting disease, surrounded by those who loved him.
Singer Bob Marley, his reggae music known far beyond its roots in Jamaica, died in a Miami hospital today.
None more than his wife, Rita Marley. For years, she remained silent about the final moments of Bob's life, holding on to memories too painful to relive. But now she finally speaks up, revealing the heartbreaking and deeply personal details of his last days. A love that transcended music. The story of Bob and Rita Marley began in the bustling streets of Kingston, Jamaica, during a time of immense cultural transformation. The mid-1960s were filled with the sounds of ska and rocksteady, and in the heart of this musical revolution, two young, ambitious souls crossed paths. Bob Marley, a determined young musician with dreams of changing the world through his music, met Rita Anderson, a talented and passionate singer. Their love story was not just a union of hearts, but of music, faith, and an unshakable commitment to a cause greater than themselves. Rita was already making strides in the music industry as a member of the Solettes, an all-female group that captured the essence of Jamaican harmonies. Bob recognized her talent and artistic depth, supporting her growth as a musician and collaborator. Their connection quickly grew beyond the studio, blossoming into a romance grounded in shared struggles, an enduring faith, and an undying passion for music. In 1966, they solidified their love and marriage, embarking on a journey that would see them become one of the most iconic couples in music history. Their relationship, however, was not confined to love alone. It was a partnership in the truest sense. As Bob's career began to rise, so did Rita's role in his life, not just as his wife, but as his bandmate, backup singer, and the mother of their children. She became an integral part of the Wailers, adding harmonies that enriched their sound. More importantly, she introduced Bob to Rastafarianism, a belief system that would go on to shape his philosophy, his lyrics, and his very existence. Yet, as their love story unfolded, it was not without trials. With fame came temptations, countless admirers, infidelities, and the strains of a life constantly on the road. Bob, revered by millions, often found himself caught between the man he was at home and the legend he was to the world. Rita, however, remained steadfast. She endured the pain of his indiscretions and the challenges that fame brought into their marriage, choosing time and again to stand by him, not just as his wife, but as his rock. Despite the turbulence, their bond remained strong, anchored by music, faith, and an unspoken understanding. Rita was not just a silent observer. She was an active participant in Bob's legacy, ensuring that his music remained deeply connected to its roots and message. She was a source of strength when he needed it the most, especially during the most challenging battle of his life, his fight against cancer. Bob Marley's health diagnosis. Bob's illness began subtly, almost unnoticed in 1977. A small dark spot beneath his toenail seemed harmless at first, an injury attributed to his love for football. But as time passed, it became clear that this was no ordinary wound. It was acral lentiginous melanoma, a rare and aggressive form of skin cancer. Doctors advised amputation, but Bob refused, adhering to his Rastafarian beliefs, which held the body as sacred and whole. For years, he continued to perform, channeling his pain into his music, never allowing his condition to overshadow his mission. Fans saw the same energetic performer on stage, but those closest to him, especially Rita, saw the toll it was taking. By 1980, his health had begun to deteriorate rapidly. His frame, once strong and commanding, grew frail. His energy, once boundless, began to fade. Rita was among the first to recognize the severity of his condition, urging him to seek further treatment. On September 21, 1980, Bob collapsed while jogging in Central Park, a sign that his health was rapidly declining. Despite this, he took the stage 2 days later at the Stanley Theater in Pittsburgh. Unbeknownst to the audience, this would be his final performance. The world-famous icon was now in the grips of a battle he could no longer mask. Determined to fight, he sought treatment in Germany under the care of Dr. Joseph Issels, a physician known for his holistic and controversial cancer treatments. Rita remained by his side, watching helplessly as the once unstoppable force of nature weakened before her eyes. Even as his body withered, Bob's spirit never broke. Rita later recounted how he continued to sing softly, whispering lyrics of hope and resilience despite the excruciating pain. But the reality was inescapable. The man who had once electrified crowds of thousands now struggled to walk. His voice, once filled with strength and defiance, grew faint. There were moments when Rita held him, feeling the weight of his suffering in his trembling hands and dimming eyes. She never left his side, offering comfort in the only way she knew how, through love and unwavering presence. By May 1981, Dr. Joseph Issels had delivered the heartbreaking truth. Bob's time was running out. He longed to return to Jamaica, to be embraced by the land and people he loved so dearly. But fate had other plans. As he attempted to make the journey home, his condition took a sudden and devastating turn, forcing an emergency landing in Miami. There, at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, surrounded by his loved ones, Bob Marley's journey came to an end on May 11, 1981. He was only 36 years old. In his final moments, Rita was there, holding his hand, whispering words of comfort as tears streamed down her face. The weight of their journey together, of love, music, faith, and sacrifice, culminated in those last fleeting moments. Before he closed his eyes forever, Bob looked at her one final time and uttered words that would echo through history. Money can't buy life. A simple yet profound statement from a man who had given everything to the world, only to realize in the end that life itself was the most precious gift. Rita, left to carry on his legacy, would go on to ensure that Bob's music, message, and memory lived on. She became the torchbearer of his mission, preserving not just the legend of Bob Marley, but the love story they shared, a love that transcended music, endured trials, and remained eternal. Rita Marley breaks her silence. For years, Rita Marley kept the details of Bob's final days to herself, the memories too painful to share. But in a rare interview, she finally spoke about the man behind the legend, the husband and father who, even as his body weakened, refused to let go of his music or his spirit. "I had to be strong," she confessed, her voice heavy with emotion. "Bob never wanted us to see his pain, but I could see it in his eyes." Rita recounted how, in the months leading up to Bob's death, she watched helplessly as the once unstoppable force of nature grew frail and weak. His body, once filled with energy, struggled against the cancer that had spread aggressively. Yet Bob, in his unwavering spirit, refused to surrender. He would try to hide it, she remembered, still playing football, still picking up his guitar, still smiling at the children like nothing was wrong. But at night, when we were alone, I could feel his struggle. She recalled how he would wince when no one was watching, how he would quietly grip his stomach or his leg, trying to suppress the agony. And yet, he never complained, never voiced his suffering. "It was as if he didn't want to burden us with his pain," she said, shaking her head. "He carried it all on his own." Even as his condition worsened, Bob clung to the one thing that never left him, his music. She remembered the many nights spent by his side, holding his hand, whispering prayers as he drifted into uneasy sleep. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he would wake up and reach for his guitar, his fingers finding the strings even when his strength was fading. He would sit there, just humming, strumming the guitar lightly, Rita recalled. Even in pain, he couldn't let go of his music. It was a part of him. It was his soul. She vividly remembered one particular night when Bob, despite his illness, played a hauntingly beautiful melody, a tune he had never recorded, a song that only she and the silence of the night bore witness to. It was beautiful, she recalled, but he never played it again. I think he was saying goodbye. As the days passed, Rita found herself shifting from being his wife to being his caretaker, his protector. She made sure he was comfortable, made sure he ate, even when he had no appetite. She massaged his aching limbs and whispered words of encouragement in his ear. He'd smile at me sometimes, a soft, knowing smile, she shared. I knew what he was trying to tell me, even though I didn't really want to see it at the time. He was preparing to leave. Despite the inevitable, Bob's spirit never wavered. He would still talk about the future, still speak of the music he wanted to create, still dream of returning to Jamaica one last time. Jah will guide me, he would say. And Rita, despite the pain gnawing at her heart, would nod and smile, holding on to the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, a miracle would happen. But deep down, she knew. She knew that the man she had loved, the legend the world adored, was slipping away, and all she could do was be there, present, holding his hand, letting him know he was not alone. Now, after all these years, Rita shares this story not just as a testimony of loss, but as a tribute to the man Bob Marley was in his final moments, resilient, passionate, and unyielding in his love for music, his family, and his people. The moment Bob told Rita the truth. As much as Bob tried to hide his pain, there came a point when even he could no longer pretend. Rita had seen the changes, the way his steps grew slower, the weight of exhaustion in his eyes, but he had never spoken about it, never admitted that the fight was slipping out of his hands. Then one evening, everything changed. It was a moment she had dreaded, yet one she knew was inevitable. For months, she had watched him endure the silent torment of his illness, refusing to let it break his spirit. But this time was different. Bob finally said the words she had been dreading. He looked at me and said, "Rita, I can't fight this anymore," she recalled, her voice barely above a whisper. It was at that moment that reality crashed down on her. Bob, the warrior, the man who had fought every battle with unwavering strength, was telling her that this was a fight he could not win. Her heart clenched, but she refused to let the tears fall. She had to be strong for him, just as he had been strong for everyone else. Still, she couldn't help but try. I told him, "You have to fight, Bob. You're strong. You've always been strong." But Bob simply shook his head, a small, peaceful smile forming on his lips. He told me, "Life is for the living, and I want you to live." Rita was stunned by his words. Even as he faced death, Bob wasn't thinking of himself. He was thinking of her, of their children, of the life that would continue after he was gone. In the days that followed, Bob grew more introspective. His energy was fading, but his mind remained sharp, his heart full of love for those around him. He spent time with his children, speaking to them in quiet tones, offering them wisdom in the simplest of words. He told Ziggy to always respect the music, to never let go of the message, Rita recalled. He told Stephen to always protect his family. He gathered them close, one by one, making sure each of them knew how much he loved them. Even when his body could no longer keep up, his spirit shone through, guiding them with the same strength that had carried him throughout his life. Bob's conversations were brief but powerful. There were no long speeches, no dramatic goodbyes, just truth, honesty, and love. He wanted his children to know that they carried a piece of him within them, that his mission would live on through them. One evening, as the sun cast golden hues across the sky, Bob called Rita and the children to sit with him. He looked at them, his gaze filled with something deeper than sadness. It was acceptance, peace. "I will always be here," he said, placing a hand over his heart. "In the music, in the people, in you." Those words stayed with Rita, echoing through the years. Bob wasn't just speaking about his love for them or his desire for them to carry on. It was his way of passing the torch. Even in his final moments, he was teaching them something profound. How to live, how to carry his message forward, and how to find strength even in the face of loss. And his message didn't fall on deaf ears. Over the years, as his children grew, many of them turned to music, just as he had. Ziggy, Stephen, and others took up the same craft that had defined Bob's life, each finding their own voice in the rhythms and messages he had cherished so deeply. His legacy lived on through their music, the lessons he had imparted, and the way they, too, used their art to connect with the world and continue his mission. His final wishes. In the last days of his life, Bob Marley's heart longed for home. No matter how much fame he had achieved, no matter how many places he had traveled, there was only one place he truly belonged: Jamaica. Rita said that he wanted to feel the sun on his skin, to hear the waves crashing on the shores of his beloved island, to breathe in the air of the land that had given him life. More than anything, he wanted to go home one last time. Rita Marley recalled their final conversation before the family attempted to fulfill his wish. Bob, weak and frail, reached for her hand, his once strong fingers now trembling, but his grip still firm. His eyes, though tired, held the same fire that had fueled his music, his message, and his mission. He took my hand and said, "Rita, make sure people do not forget my message." It wasn't just a request. It was a command, a plea, a final wish. He didn't care about the awards, the wealth, or the fame. What mattered to him was that the world never lost sight of what his music stood for: unity, love, resistance, and truth. The family did everything they could to get Bob back to Jamaica. Plans were made, arrangements were set, but time was not on their side. His health had deteriorated faster than anyone expected. The cancer had spread, ravaging his body, leaving him with little strength to endure the journey. The plane was en route to Jamaica, but fate intervened. Bob was too weak to continue. The decision was made to land in Miami, where he would spend his final hours. His last wish to return home was heartbreakingly unfulfilled. But even in those final moments, when pain should have consumed him, Bob did not falter. Rita sat beside him, her heart breaking as she watched the man she loved slip away. And yet, even in the face of death, Bob Marley was not afraid. He looked at her with quiet strength, his voice soft but steady. "He told me to be strong," Rita recalled, her voice thick with emotion. That this was not the end, but just the next journey. Despite everything, he still reassured her. Even as his body failed him, his spirit remained unshaken. He held on to his faith, to the belief that life was not something that ended, but something that transformed. And as she looked at the man who had once been full of boundless energy, she made a silent vow. She would honor his last wish. She would ensure that the world never forgot his message. Because Bob Marley wasn't just a musician. He was a movement, a legacy, a revolution, and his spirit would live forever. Bob Marley's final moments. Rita Marley still remembers the moment Bob took his last breath, as if it happened yesterday. The world saw him as a legend, a prophet of reggae. But to her, he was the man she had built a life with, the father of her children, the love that had endured through trials, fame, and pain. She was there, by his side, as she had always been, holding his hand, whispering prayers, willing time to stop just for a little longer. "I was there holding his hand," she shared, her voice breaking under the weight of the memory. His voice was weak, but his spirit was still strong. Even as his body faded, that spark, the fire that had fueled his music, his message, his movement, was still there. But then, in a quiet, almost fleeting moment, he looked at her, and with the last of his strength, he whispered the words that would haunt her forever. "Money can't buy life." It wasn't just a farewell. It was a lesson, a truth he had always lived by. For Bob, wealth, fame, and success had never been the goal. His mission had always been bigger than that. Those final words were not only for Rita, but for the world. He was reminding us all, Rita says, blinking back tears, that no matter how much fame or success you have, life itself is the real blessing. She held onto his hand, feeling the warmth slowly leave his fingers. She didn't want to let go. She wasn't ready. I wanted to hold on to him forever. In the days after Bob's passing, grief consumed Rita. She had lost more than just a husband. She had lost her partner in everything, the man who had given her life meaning beyond just being a wife and mother. And yet she had no time to break down. Suddenly, she was not just mourning Bob Marley. She was carrying his legacy. The world watched her closely. Fans, the media, even members of Bob's own circle had questions. Who would carry the torch now? Would his message fade? Could she, a woman who had lived in Bob's shadow, take on the responsibility of preserving the empire he had built? People questioned me, doubted me, she admitted. But I knew what Bob wanted. She had no choice but to be strong. There were legal battles over Bob's estate, challenges with Tough Gong Studios, and the daunting task of ensuring that his music and message would never be diluted or forgotten. I never see myself as Bob Marley's widow, she said with quiet conviction. I still feel I'm working with him. I feel I'm still his partner. Bob Marley's legacy was bigger than his music. It was also deeply personal. His relationship with Rita had been complex, layered with love, pain, loyalty, and betrayal. His infidelities were widely known, and Rita had endured many hardships as his wife. It wasn't easy, she admitted. There were times I felt pain, times I felt anger. She had to share him with the world, and at times, with other women. But despite everything, their connection ran deeper than marriage vows. It was built on something unshakable: purpose. But in the end, she continued, we shared something bigger than ourselves. We shared a purpose. Rita knew that Bob's love for her, despite its imperfections, was real. And she also knew that their union had given birth to more than just children. It had given birth to a mission that would outlive both of them. Determined to keep Bob's legacy alive in more ways than just music, Rita launched the Rita Marley Foundation, dedicated to education, healthcare, and female empowerment in both Jamaica and Ghana. She poured her heart into philanthropy, ensuring that Bob's impact extended beyond the sound waves and into the lives of those who needed it most. Bob wanted to uplift the people, she said. He wanted change, and that's what I've tried to continue. Even as the years passed, Rita never stopped feeling Bob's presence. Some nights, I hear his voice in the wind, she smiled. Sometimes, when I see the children sing his songs, I feel like he's right there with us. Bob Marley may have left this world, but in Rita's heart, in their children, in the music that still plays across generations, he never truly left, and he never will. For years, Rita Marley remained silent about Bob's final moments, choosing instead to focus on preserving his legacy.